Gabriella from Spirit Child here. I wanted to start doing something a bit different on this channel, not only to offer guided meditations as and when it suits me, but to offer you an opportunity to discover some of the very amazing things that I take for granted in my everyday life, such as reading fantastic books from great teachers. And not many people know that I studied English literature back at university, and I would read anything up to 8 books a day. And I've also had so much feedback since recording these meditations that my voice is something that really makes my meditations stand out. So I thought, I enjoy reading and I've had good feedback on my voice. Why not read for you all and read passages from books that have really touched me or meant something to me over the years, or even just passages I read in passing that I think will resonate with people. And they may only be chapters or short bursts, but I figured it's something that maybe people will enjoy listening to. So here goes. The first book I'm going to take a passage from is the Book of Joy, which is a conversation between the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop, Desmond Tutu. And the particular chapter that I picked out today is on the topic of loneliness. And this book, although it's about joy, helps us understand what joy is from looking at the contrast. So there are certain chapters on fear and anxiety, loneliness, compassion, this kind of thing. So here goes. We are often alone without feeling lonely, and feel lonely when we are not alone, as when we are in a crowd of strangers or at a party of people we do not know. Clearly, the psychological experience of loneliness is quite different from the physical experience of being alone. We can feel joy when we are alone, but not when we are lonely. After our tea break, the dialogue returned to this topic. Your Holiness, we finished our last session talking about loneliness, and I wanted to come back to the subject for one more question. Monks spend a lot of time alone. So what is the difference between being alone and being lonely? The Dalai Lama turned to the Archbishop to see if he wanted to answer. No, I've not been a monk, man. You start. Monks separate themselves from the material world, not just physically, but mentally, according to his religion, he said, pointing to the Archbishop. Christian monks are always thinking they're in the light of God, dedicated to serving God. We cannot touch God directly, so the only way is serving God's children, humanity. So we are never really lonely. Much depends on your attitude. If you are filled with negative judgment and anger, then you will feel separate from other people. You will feel lonely. But if you have an open heart and are filled with trust and friendship, even if you are physically alone, even living a hermit's life, you will never feel lonely. It is ironic, isn't it? I offered, remembering Lama Tenzin, who told us while we brought donuts on our way to Dharamsala, that he had a desire to live in a cave for the traditional length of over 3 years. You can spend 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days in a cave and not be lonely, but you can be lonely in the middle of a crowd. That's right, the Dalai Lama replied. There are at least 7 billion people, and the number of sentient beings is limitless. If you are always thinking about the 7 billion human beings, you will never experience loneliness. The only thing that will bring happiness is affection and warmheartedness. This really brings inner strength and self-confidence, reduces fear, develops trust, and trust brings friendship. We are social animals, and cooperation is necessary for our survival. But cooperation is entirely based on trust. When there is trust, people are brought together. Whole nations are brought together. When you have a more compassionate mind and cultivate warm-heartedness, the whole atmosphere around you becomes more positive and friendlier. You see friends everywhere. If you feel fear and distrust, then other people will distance themselves. They will also feel cautious, suspicious, and distrustful. Then comes the feeling of loneliness. When someone is warm-hearted, they are always completely relaxed. If you live with fear and consider yourself as something special, then automatically, emotionally, you are distanced from others. You then create the basis for feelings of alienation from others and loneliness. So, I never consider, even when giving a talk to a large crowd, that I am something special. I am His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he said, mocking his venerated status. I always emphasize that when I meet people, we are all the same human beings. 1,000 people, same human being. 10,000 or 100,000, same human being, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Then, you see, no barrier. Then my mind remains completely calm and relaxed. If too much emphasis on myself and I start to think I'm something special, then more anxiety, more nervousness. The paradox is that although the drive behind excessive self-focus is to seek greater happiness for yourself, it ends up doing exactly the opposite. When you focus too much on yourself, you also become alienated from yourself, since the need for connection with others is such a fundamental part of who we are as human beings. This excessive self-focus is also bad for your health. Too much fear and distrust, too much focus on yourself leads to stress and high blood pressure. Many years ago, I was at a gathering of medical scientists and researchers at Columbia University in New York. One of the medical scientists said in his presentation of those people who disproportionately use the first-person pronouns I, me, and mine, have a significantly greater risk of having a heart attack. He didn't explain why, but I felt this must be true. This is a deep insight. With too much self-focus, your vision becomes narrow, and with this even a small problem appears out of a proportion and unbearable. Also, fear and distrust come from too much focus on yourself. This will cause you to always remain separate from your human brothers and sisters. This brings loneliness and difficulty communicating with other people. After all, you are part of the community, so you have to deal with them. Your interest and your future depend on other people. If you isolate yourself from them, how can you be a happy person? You just have more worry and more stress. Sometimes I say that too much self-centeredness closes our inner door, and it becomes hard to communicate with other people. When we are concerned with the well-being of other human beings, that inner door opens, and we are able to communicate very easily with other people. The Dalai Lama was saying that when one is thinking about others with kindness and compassion, one is never lonely. Open-heartedness, warm-heartedness is the antidote to loneliness. It has often amazed me that one day I can walk down the street feeling judgmental and critical of others, and I will feel separate and lonely, and the next day I can walk down the same street with more open-hearted acceptance and compassion, and suddenly everyone seems warm and friendly. It is almost as if my inner state of mind and heart changes the physical and social world around me completely. This focus on the importance of warm-heartedness echoes the research of social psychologists Chen Bozong and Shira Gabriel, who have found that when people are feeling lonely or socially rejected, they literally seek warmth, like sipping hot soup. What the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop were saying is that when we generate that warmth simply by opening our hearts and turning our attention and our concern to other people. Archbishop, did you want to add anything? I know you haven't been a monastic, but you do spend a lot of time in prayer and meditation on your own. Certainly in our sort of prayer, the Archbishop explained. It is never the alone speaking to the alone. Our concept of God is of a God who is one, but who is a fellowship, a community, the Trinity, and we are made in the image of this God. When you become a Christian, you are incorporated into a fellowship, so even when you go into retreat, you are not alone. It's similar to what the Dalai Lama is saying, I said. If you connect, even if that fellowship is 7 billion people, then you don't feel lonely. Yes, the Archbishop replied. It's something of an oxymoron to be lonely, but I can very well understand what you feel when you feel alienated, when you are not on the same wavelength, as it were. And one wants to enter into that sense of being in solidarity. I don't think we help people by making them feel guilty. We want to try to be as welcoming as possible, as we possibly can, and say that the experience they have is something that many other people also have. Feeling lonely is not something that we do deliberately. I don't think you set out to say, I want to feel lonely. It's just there. It happens, and for very many reasons. You want to make the person feel really as they are, special, and accepted as they are, and help to open them. I can very well understand the incredible anguish and pain that someone must feel who is cooped up in a room because they are scared of going out and being rejected. And you just hope and pray that they will find a fellowship of people who will embrace and welcome them. It's wonderful to see people who were closed down open up like a beautiful flower in the warmth and acceptance of those around them. What I had learned from our dialogue was that we did not have to wait for others to open their hearts to us. By opening our heart to them, we could feel connected to them, whether on a mountaintop or in the middle of Manhattan. And that's taken from the chapter Loneliness, No Need for Introduction, from the Book of Joy. I hope you enjoyed that, and I plan to record many more book recitals for you. Thank you.